So the idea of selling as is can be an attractive idea when you can skip all the hassle and time required to get a house ready. At the same time, you may be wondering how much more money you could be netting by doing some repairs and some fix-ups versus how much you could sell for as is. Now, sometimes as a seller, you may be tempted to just do the bare minimum and very basic cleanup. I get it. So we will take a look at the pros and cons of selling your home as is. And lastly, I will give you my house hack fix-up and repair formula to help you determine whether you can net more money or cost you money.
Giddy up.
Hi, I'm Harold Powell. I'm a local real estate agent serving Ventura and the surrounding communities. So if you like my video and want to stay up to date on all things real estate for Ventura and the surrounding area, I suggest hitting the subscribe, the like, and the bell icon to be notified of future content. First off, let's address the subject of selling as is. Now, on a typical home sale in California, the property is sold as is subject to a buyer's inspection, which means the seller is not obligated to make any repairs other than the city or state mandated items that are agreed to in the purchase contract. So it also means that after the inspections are done, the buyer can ask the seller to do repairs or ask for a closing cost credit in lieu of repairs. So it really becomes another round of negotiations that can happen that will either result with the buyer and seller moving forward or canceling the transaction. Now, I would recommend watching my video on negotiating requests for repair if that's where you're currently at in a transaction. Otherwise, let's look at the 3 pros and the 3 cons of selling as is. I'll start with the pros. Number 1, it saves you time. Selling as is can save a lot of time, especially for some properties that require a complete overhaul. You could say that the more work needed, the more time saved. And as an example, I recently sold a house that had been damaged by fire and also had some water damage due to that. The estimate to repair was about $200,000. It would require 7 to 10 months to get permits and complete the repairs. And the owner lived out of town and opted to sell as is after weighing the time and effort required to get the home ready. Naturally, there can be other time-related issues such as a job transfer, financial distress, divorce, or even health issues. So for some, selling as is may be a good option for those who would prefer sooner rather than later. Number 2 is convenience. Selling it as is avoids obviously all the work and hassle of fixing up the property. And the 2 most frequent scenarios where I see this more frequently are with an inherited property or a rental property. An example would be a probate or a trust sale where an out-of-area family inherits a property with a mortgage. And being out of area, the convenience of doing minimal fix-ups and opting for a quicker sale is appealing. Second is a tenant-occupied rental. Rather than disrupt the tenants, the seller opts to just sell it as is while the tenant continues to occupy the property until it closes. The other convenience option is once a seller is in escrow, a seller can opt to give a buyer a credit in lieu of doing repairs, which again is much easier than coordinating repairs, especially for a tenant-occupied property. Number 3 is avoid out-of-pocket costs or expenses. Selling your home as is avoids out-of-pocket expense and may be a practical choice for those who can't afford to make repairs or improvements prior to listing your home on the market. Otherwise, I will say there are a number of repairs and contractors that we work with that will defer payment until the property closes escrow. Additionally, some repairs may need to be done in order to satisfy financing requirements. Now, there are often some practical solutions that can be taken to avoid a complete overhaul and drastically reduce a seller's out-of-pocket expense. So for more on that, I suggest watching my video on what not to fix before selling. Otherwise, as I mentioned before, opting for a buyer closing cost credit in lieu of home inspection repairs may also eliminate potential out-of-pocket expense. Now, I should mention that clients or past clients that hire me to help sell their home can use my local moving ban to declutter or donate or move items from their existing property to even to their next location for local moves. And they can also use it at a later date if they need to get rid of items later, or if they just need to move kids to an apartment for a local move. All right, so let's take a look at the 3 cons of selling as is. Con number 1, fewer retail buyers. The buyer that will pay the most for a property is an emotionally invested retail buyer that will be occupying the property. They will nearly always pay more than an investor or a flipper because a buyer buying a home to live in becomes emotionally invested, which increases the value of the property in the eyes of the buyer. Now, typically, a retail buyer will buy on emotion and justify the decision with logic. The other reason selling it as is reduces the number of buyers is that it requires buyers to have additional funds to come out of pocket for repairs and fix-ups. And a fair number of buyers have saved just enough money for the down payment and closing costs, and this additional cost prevents them from buying a property in this condition. So some buyers just don't want the hassle or the additional time involved in making the repairs. On the flip side, you will attract more interest from investment buyers and flippers who are looking to rent out the property to flip it. This type of buyer will want to buy low enough to rent it out or turn a profit and sell high, which brings us to number 2, below market offers. Now, this will largely depend on the condition and the amount of work to be done. The greater the amount of work to be done, the greater the percentage that the property will attract below market offers from investors or flippers. Or another way of saying it is, the greater the list of repairs, the fewer number of retail buyers will be interested. At the same time, minor items that run just a couple $1,000s won't typically scare off your retail buyer. Otherwise, investors and flippers will typically make offers that are anywhere from 5 to 20% below market. That brings us now to number 3 on the list of cons. Selling your home as is can restrict financing on the property. Some loans, such as VA or FHA, will have health and safety requirements that are a lot more restrictive than, let's say, a conventional loan. And if a property doesn't meet these requirements and a buyer is planning on using FHA or VA loan, they won't be eligible to purchase the property. So this would reduce the amount of emotionally invested retail offers that you could choose from. Now, a side note, just because a seller decides to sell a property as is does not mean the seller doesn't have to disclose what they know that is wrong with the property. It's imperative to disclose known facts, defects that can affect the value of the property. I would suggest watching my video on seller disclosure for that. All right. So let's get to my house hack formula to help determine whether it's worth doing some updates and repairs. Will it net you more money or cost you money? Now, this may require the help of your local real estate agent to nail down some facts and estimates. So, step number 1 is to get a comparative market analysis on your specific area and compare homes on the market in similar conditions, similar features. Ideally the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms and similar square footage so that you can get an estimate of its current value and in its current condition. So step number 2, find properties that have been fixed up to come up with a EARV estimate, which is the term flippers use. It stands for after rehab value. So the goal is to determine if we could achieve a similar look without improving the property or overspending. Step number 3 is get your estimates for the areas for improvements. You'll want to prioritize which items will have the greatest impact on the value and which items may be better off to offer a credit. Step 4, the formula. The formula is to take the as-is price plus improvements and then subtract that from the EARV to determine your profit. It should be a positive number. If it's a negative number, it's telling you you shouldn't do it or need to look at other options. Now, this is definitely where I would recommend discussing this with your real estate agent. So let's take a quick example at a specific home I had sold that needed some updates. Now, this property that my clients inherited, the property is an original condition, 1,100 square foot, entry level, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that very little was done to it over the years. The as-is value at the time, without doing anything, was somewhere around $660,000 to $670,000. We obtained estimates, prioritized a list of items to do to create a value for the buyer. The seller decided to have the entire inside painted, including the kitchen cabinets, add some hardware, update the flooring, change out the bathroom vanity, and update the lighting. Now, the seller chose not to replace the stove or oven since that would have required changing out the countertop, but they did offer a $500 credit for the oven that was not working. Now, the seller spent a total of $13,500 towards the improvements. And here's a quick recap of the cost. It was $5,000 on the flooring, $4,500 on the interior paint, $1,600 on painting the cabinets, $200 on cabinet hardware, $2,000 on the bathroom, the vanity, and the lighting, $200 on power washing the exterior. So after the improvements were done, we put the property up for sale for $709,000, ended up with multiple offers and selling it to an FHA buyer for $745,000. So if we run with the assumption that the as-is sale price was $670,000, then our seller ended up netting about $61,500 by just spending $13,500. And another 3 weeks of time to get it ready. So the moral of the story is you don't have to do a complete overhaul to improve your rate of return. Now, of course, if you found this video helpful, give it a like. Thanks.